All right, Alabama fans, welcome to the BamaOnLine recruiting show. We're about to have Andrew Bone join us in 1 minute. I was trying to wait for him. He got a little bit lost. He had to drop a story, and he's going to also tweet out the link. But appreciate everybody for turning into the show. Obviously, a big day. It's been a minute since Alabama's had a commitment, and you wait for these moments. You watch the staff build up and build that momentum. And I think with Jordan Edmondson, I think it's a little bit better day today because you had waited since February. We had that pick in early on in February. He was originally expected to commit on February 19th and instead decided to postpone it, had some construction at his school. So, anyways, welcome to everybody to the show. Good to see you guys and gals. Always glad to have you here. Good to see some of the staple guys. What's up, Bob? Bama Metcalf. My guy says this after every commitment, and he's not wrong. All right. Andrew Bone. Can you hear us, Andrew?
Hey, can we hear? Can you see me?
I can see you. Can you hear us? All right. Andrew's having a little bit difficulty. Do y'all hear us all right now? C5 Adam jumping in with the roll tide. Welcome in to every one of you guys. We're going to see if Andrew can get everything worked out. Um, Making sure, Andrew, we couldn't actually hear Andrew. Um, but welcome anyways. Jordan Edmondson has committed to Alabama. Again, this is the BamaOnLine recruiting show. We're having a little bit of difficulties. Andrew Bone's trying to re-sign in, but we wanted to go live. This is a pretty big commitment. And again, to recap, Jordan Edmunds has a great relationship with, you guessed it, Mo Linquist. Does a terrific job with Mo and building that relationship. And he's done that since he's got here. And that's a pretty good deal in the secondary, considering what Alabama fans were used to, because you had not only Nick Saban all those years, but you had guys like Jeremy Pruitt, you had Kirby Smart, you had T-Rob, you had Carl Scott, who we absolutely can't forget about, who set a really high bar for that secondary recruiting. And then now you've seen Mo Linquist come in, and I'm telling you, he's right there at that same level they were at. And I don't say that lightly. Let's see if we can get Andrew in here now. Andrew Bone, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good. There you go. So Andrew Bone has made it. He's a little bit late. He's
What's
got
up,
on his
guys?
nondescript bank robber outfit, nondescript 5'10" male, black hat, no distinguishing marks. But Andrew, welcome to the show. We got a decent crowd here building up to 50. We waited a minute for this one, right? Jordan made us wait a little bit, and I think the drama, because it did kind of sound like maybe, a little bit of trickery when they said there was construction work. But Andrew, there was actually construction work that delayed this originally. Andrew.
There was, and we even had people on our site. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so we even had people on our site that talked about the construction that was going on at Sprayberry High School. So it wasn't just some made up thing. But after he kind of realized, all right, maybe this isn't the right time for me to do it, he decided to wait a little bit. Tennessee, Georgia, they were all pushing hard for him, and then Oklahoma came into the mix, and he decided to take a trip out to Norman earlier this month. Ends up making it back to Tuscaloosa this past weekend. And it was a great weekend for him. I talked to his mom. We had a great story feature with his mom, Janae, on BOL Sunday night. And, she told me that night she didn't think he was going to take any more visits. She thought it was, pretty much a done deal that he was going to announce a decision for Alabama this week. And that's what happened. So it's a big pickup there for Alabama. Coach Mo Linquist does another fantastic job, and credit to the entire coaching staff.
Yeah, while we were waiting on you, one point I've been thinking about is if you think about the secondary at Alabama, I think that bar was probably as high as any other position that you ever could run across it at a university because you had Nick Saban, Of course, recruiting for Alabama, which was a major plus, obviously. But you also had guys like Kirby Smart, Jeremy Pruitt, Carl Scott, T Rob. All those guys did a great job. And here Mo is going one on one with the going one on one with the best of the best.
Yeah, I think he's done a fantastic job. And you kind of look back. I remember when Nick Saban first retired, everybody was posting on our board, posting all over social media. Alabama wasn't going to be able to get the same caliber defensive players that Alabama was used to, especially in the defensive backfield. That was all going away. But you look at last year's recruiting class, the job that Coach Mo, Courtney Morgan, Kalen DeBoer, Kane Womack, all those guys were able to do with Dejon Lee, Chuck McDonald. What was last year all about? It was all about they could recruit the West Coast. Now you're starting to see, after a year being in the Southeast, they're starting to make their footprint here, and going into the state of Georgia, landing a big target that was heavily recruited by the Bulldogs, heavily recruited by Tennessee and several others. I think that's a good sign for things to come.
Yeah, and let's talk about Jordan as a player. Let's don't get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, this is one of the elite players in his class. This is a guy that has won MVP awards, went against some of the best in the country. More than held his own everywhere he was, and he's been a guy that will compete. Long length, had a lot of a lot of attention on him. We've seen him rise up to 5-star. I think he's 17th in the nation on the composite, which is a pretty good gauge that everyone's got some respect for him. But again, you talk about his size and length, and we keep saying that Mo Linguist likes speed and he likes length, and he seems to, and of course, I think everybody likes that, but I think Mo focuses entirely on that when he's working on that secondary.
Yeah, and there's not many cornerbacks that we've seen that Alabama's pursued that are under 6'1". Dejon Lee, 6'3.5", 6'4". You have Chuck McDonald, who's 6'1", and now with Jordan Edmunds, who's close to 6'3". I had a chance to talk to his defensive backs coach, Chris Stewart. Not the Chris Stewart that's up in Newark right now, but Chris Stewart over in Marietta. And he said he had a lot of great things to say. He's coached them for the last 3 years. Said over the last pretty much year, his body's really kind of filled out to the length, to the size, to his range. And, he's got great footwork, great hands. Said he still can work on his speed a little bit, but his quickness, coming off the line, being able to twist his hips, really impressive. But he's going to continue to fill out, continue to get bigger. But this is a guy that has dominated pretty much every camp he's been to. Talked to Chad Simmons from On3, and he said, he goes up against the best player on the best team at wide receiver every single Friday night, and always does extremely well. So this is a huge pickup for Alabama in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, the thing is, the scary thing is they're not done. I mean, there's so much meat on the bone, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And again, while we got your attention, for you those that if you haven't yet, please hit that like and subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. We need to get Andrew a hat, which actually has a Nike logo, Adidas logo. He's going with the basic right now. We got to get him up to that next level, but we do appreciate every one of y'all that comes in to watch us. It's been a minute, since a commitment, and so we enjoy doing these live commitment shows. But again, Andrew, we're going to get into that later, but he's not the only defensive back commitment, right? They're already got two. One's in that top 20, one's in the top 100. And again, let's talk about Zion Gibson, who's already in this class.
Yeah, Zion Gibson committed to Alabama back in Christmas time. Christmas Eve was when he announced his decision, and Kalen DeBoer and his staff, they were on him early. They started recruiting him last spring. I think he was really the first in-state offer, maybe the second in-state offer in the 26th class, and they went and saw him in January. He was back in Tuscaloosa for Junior Day, but over the course of the last month and a half, he's been pretty focused on his basketball team. Gadsden City made it to the state finals this year, so he had a long basketball season, and then he kind of entered track season. But, he's a guy that's still taking some visits. Tennessee, Auburn, still pushing hard. They're going to get summer officials. Alabama's going to get that last visit on June the 20th. Supposed to be back for the A-Day game. But, that's a guy that he's an in-state kid, and, Alabama really likes. But It's going to be really interesting with this defensive backboard, as you mentioned. I mean, there's several guys that they're very high on that are also very high on Alabama. You know, guys like Elbert Hill up in Ohio, Brandon Arrington out on the West Coast, and there's a few others, including Caden Harris from Tennessee. So it's going to be really fun to watch how this unfolds over the course of the next few months with guys coming in for spring and for summer official visits.
Yeah, and if you want to know what a 5-star can do to your class this early, Alabama just went from 13th to top 5 in the country.
Wow.
Again, I mean, this it doesn't take much. You have a decommitment or something happen tonight, Alabama could be number 2, or you could have other guys get commitments. They could drop down to 7 and 8. I enjoy the back and forth. I mean, the finish last year, number 1, number 5, will we be in the top 5? Number 3 was a fun finish. But you're absolutely right. Still got guys that are going to be recruiting. They're going to have to get picky at some point. You know, they're going to have to get picky where tough decisions have to be made because everybody they're really looking at is going to be a highly regarded guy. Even let's talk about the other commitments. We got Jamarian Matthews, a defensive, was in the state of Alabama, has moved to Georgia, and they have Chris Booker. That's 4 top, all of them in that top 200. We got them in the top 20, 4-star Chris Booker. And I still think, let's talk about Booker for a minute. This is a guy, we talked about this last year a lot. How will they evaluate? And we saw people, and we're going to beat that horse because y'all asked us. Y'all rode that horse to our party. Now we're going to beat it till it's dead. We're going to beat it. But absolutely, this staff can evaluate how many 3-star guys have they offered? How many 3-star guys did they commit? How many ended up 3 stars? Booker's that guy. We were talking about him early on, and Coach Cap did a really good job with him, Andrew.
Yeah, I remember, thinking about some of the linemen last year. I mean, obviously, some of those guys weren't 5 stars, and 2 of them ended up as 5 stars. And Jackson Lloyd, who was a 3-star last January, and Michael Carroll, who was a low 4-star, ends up as the number 1 offensive guard in the country. Mal Waldrop, 3-star, and he was called out yesterday by Geno Vandermark as one of the guys who's really impressed early on in spring practice. So, Chris Booker is a guy that, 6'4", 285 pounds right now. Alabama extended an offer pretty early. I think it was it was February 1st at the first junior day. They had 30 kids at that junior day. I think 29 of them had offers prior to visiting. The only one that did not have an offer was Chris Booker. So he comes to town, gets measured, gets all the measurements, arm length, hand size, obviously height and weight. But coaching staff loves him. And when you're only taking 2 interior players in this class, and you go ahead and take a guy in February that doesn't have a lot of offers, and probably somebody that you could have waited on. You could have waited until the spring. You could have waited until the summer to really decide if you wanted him. They wanted him. They went ahead and took that commitment, and probably only going to take 1 more interior guy this cycle.
Yeah, and the thing about Booker is he showed up 22 pounds heavier than when he visited during the season, crossing that 280 mark, and he's got an 82-inch wingspan. That's pretty daggone good for a 6'4" player. And also Jamarian Matthews, he was a guy that we kind of very quiet prospect, has moved to Georgia since and is going to Gainesville.
Yeah, but we still consider him an in-state commit, right?
He committed when he committed in the state of Alabama. We're not having him move out to hurt that to carry on that theory that Alabama doesn't recruit the state.
Yeah, that's right. And Alabama offered him back during the season when he was at Sparkman High School in Harvest in North Alabama. That's a guy that Freddie Roach jumped on pretty early, 6'3", 260 pounds. I think they see him more in that banded type role at this time. 17 sacks during his junior season. That's some high production. So they were able to take his commitment early. Now he is still going to take some visits. There's schools that are still on him pretty heavily, including Clemson, who's been on him for a long time. So we're going to watch that pretty closely. But he really has that strong relationship with Freddie Roach. Mom likes Alabama. She grew up an Auburn fan, has always liked Auburn, but after going down to Tuscaloosa a couple times, including junior day and last week for spring practice, she's starting to really like it down there.
Defensive line, I think there'll be a lot of fans pretty happy this year because last year they didn't go after a big group and there was a crazy Alabama can't get defensive linemen. No, they didn't want. They wanted a couple of defensive linemen. You obviously come into that We won a couple, and then we'll take Justice Terry. He was that good, but not many are going to fall in that latter category. They also knew amidst the panic that, Kelby Collins might want to transfer home, that Latham could be moving to linebacker. They knew that Tim Keenan was toying with the Bama fans. We had been told, he'd already told the staff he's coming back. He had some fun on social media. That's another one. And LT Overton, who many thought were gone. So they knew what they're doing. This year, you see a little bit heavier. You're seeing a bigger group come in. We saw 2 visitors yesterday, Andrew,
Yeah,
on the defensive line. I'm sorry.
yeah, you have Kamarion Johnson out of Muscle Shoals, that was in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that's a big kid. 6'5", 265 pounds already. I mean, you can already tell that he's going to, probably be a really big interior defensive lineman here in the next couple of years. And I had a chance to talk to Tyson Bacon earlier today out of Hoover High School. This is a Tennessee commitment, 6'3" or 6'4", 265 pounds. One thing that stood out to me about our conversation is he talked about Jeremiah Beeman, and he and Jeremiah Beeman about the same size in high school. He said Jeremiah Beeman's up to 315 pounds. He's really watched that development there, and kind of sees his trajectory on the same path as Jeremiah Beeman. So that's another guy that we're watching closely. A lot more focus on some in-state guys this year on the defensive front than we saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, you get those guys coming in, and you have the big bodies. They'll be, coming in for junior days. J.J. Finch, who we haven't talked about. A lot of these guys kind of do fit that bandit role, but all of them aren't gonna end up at the bandit role. Will seems worried to death. Will, he's on the BamaOnLine.com roundtable, probably currently in a Publix chicken tender thread, or he might be talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. Joe, he's been asking a few times. Uh, Ruffin's an interesting one because he had quite the day. I'm curious to see what happens because he had one of the best days in this cycle so far, where we looked up and he had Texas, Bama, LSU, who had visited him in that day, I believe, who offered, and then Georgia called and offered him. I still think there's a little bit left to see on exactly what happens with Ruffin, but they're going to have in-state targets this year. And the one thing we know about Alabama prospects, they love themselves. They love their NIL and they value themselves very highly. So it's going to be interesting to see. But a big name to me, Andrew, and I know to you, but a really big name was on campus this week. And the running back is probably in that 5-star consideration, showed up actually a day earlier than expected.
Yeah, Jackson running back Xavier Kroll. I mean, this is a kid that's been to Tuscaloosa, not 8 or 9 times since, throughout his entire recruitment, 8 or 9 times since Kalen DeBoer and his staff have been in Tuscaloosa. So that's a strong relationship building with this staff. Robert Gillespie's done a really good job. And, this is a guy that reclassified from 27 to 26, and he's still the number 2 running back in the country. So, this is a special player. I mean, he's going to take visits, but Alabama's really setting the tone there. And, Alabama getting that last visit on June the 20th, really big there. But, Texas, Auburn, Georgia, even a couple of the Florida schools, Florida State, they're all pushing. I mean, they don't want to say that, they don't want to get a no answer from Kroll, but Alabama's certainly done a great job. In-state kid, grew up an Alabama fan, so we'll see what happens over these next few months.
Kroll's been on campus so much. Ryan Williams like, damn, dude. Like, dang, you're cut. You know what I mean? Ryan was the one we thought was coming every weekend. So.
And he's coming back for A-Day. So he's a regular.
It feels like, last year it was kind of offensive heavy for most of the class. It feels like this year's a little bit more defensively. 3 of the 4 commitments are defense. A lot of the guys we hear about the defense, I think maybe give Grubb a little bit of time to adjust to this class. Came in late to let his opinion, to watch his wide receivers. And we know how picky they are at wide receivers. Shep is it, man. You know what I mean? I'd be single if all the girls were as picky as Shep was. I'd be eternally single. So, going out there, Andrew, let's talk about a couple more defensive back targets before we get out of here. And again, everyone that jumped in, we appreciate you guys doing spur of the moment. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we appreciate y'all jumping in. That was not necessarily your fault. I thought it could have been my fault, but give us a like, give us a subscription if you get a chance. And also, for you that haven't tried out BamaOnline.com, there's a lot happening. Basketball, Charlie Potter, and Blake Byler are in Newark. Hopefully they get to make it back. And then obviously we got recruiting, we got spring coming up. Everything's happening all at once. And the portal, I don't know how the hell the basketball portal's wide open in the middle of the Sweet 16. So we're still trying to figure all that. But we got $1 for the first week. If y'all want to give us a chance, we're worth 100 pennies. I can promise you that. But Andrew, let's talk about Brandon Arrington. I think he's kind of a popular guy, speed guy, uh, fast. He's got that connection, that West Coast connection. Going to have his list of schools to choose from, but we keep hearing Bama's in that mix.
Yeah, he had a great trip to Alabama Junior Day last month, and I think coming out of that visit, Alabama was in the driver's seat. And I'm not saying they're not in the driver's seat, but he has taken some other visits this month. He's expected back in Tuscaloosa at some point this spring. Has not said when, but he has already set an official visit date for middle of June. But Georgia's in it. Oregon, USC, they're certainly pushing hard to kind of keep him out on the West Coast, and we kind of know that they're probably going to go high NIL right there. So we'll see. But I think Arrington is certainly a guy that has developed a strong relationship, and you got to get with the Alabama stuff, but you got to give a lot of credit to guys like Coach Mo. Courtney Morgan, those guys have really recruited the West Coast extremely hard. And I think they're certainly going to be in that top 2, top 3 all the way until the end, and that's what you want.
Yeah, there's going to be some battles. We see that a lot every year. There's going to be the kids are now everything's kind of expedited. It's sped up considerable amount. They're taking their official visits earlier. They're taking their unofficials January, you saw the coaches were in their business, seeing them at the schools. Hectic January. They're not even technically seniors yet. Then they turn around, they're taking all these visits. By the time they get to the summer, a lot of these guys have seen a ton of schools. If they run track, that's a game changer. That's kind of a
Yeah,
that's a
that's
that's
what
a
we've
time
and
hog.
that's what we've seen this year with a lot of guys that haven't taken visits this spring. The track season, a lot of those track events are on Saturdays. So, and with Alabama, especially, their practices are in the morning. So a
Yeah.
lot of the kids, a lot of the guys that we've seen come in for spring practice, they've been coming in on the night before and spending the night and spending time at practice the next day. But certainly a big difference from last year to this year as far as coaches. This last year was, hey, nice to meet you. This year it's, hey, good to see you again. And I think that's certainly huge. I mean, another DB, Elbert Hill.
Yeah, Albert Hill, you're in Ohio. We saw that whole Justin Hill, and we're pretty much ahead of the curve on that. Bama had a chance because he was really written off for a long time. But we knew that they had the best recruiter in the world on him, his mama, and she was the world's biggest Bama fan. You know what I mean? So that was a big thing. Plus the fit and the position, and again, Christian Robinson did a great job. But they're battling for him and Sincere Johnson, so they're going to
Yeah.
be battling. And before we get out of here, let's answer one question. It's a pretty good question. Um, will Bama take 2 in this class, Andrew Bone?
I doubt it. I think they're just trying to get one right now. There's not a lot of guys that are still out there that are not committed. That they are recruiting. They got one guy that's going to be coming in here in a couple of weeks. Derek Zammit. He's a kid that they offered last month. Going to visit for the first time for the 8A game, and we'll kind of see what happens there. Released a top 4 just yesterday with Alabama, Mississippi State, Syracuse, Washington, and while that's kind of a weird group of schools,
It
you got to
is.
look at the coaches who are at those schools right now and the job that they've done as far as looking at quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks, and Fran Brown coming from Georgia, so he knows. I mean, Jed Fish, Jeff Levy. Those are some really good quarterback coaches. Those 2 guys right there. So I think Alabama is going to see what happens with Derek Zammit, and I think they'll just get one quarterback if they can.
I agree with 5 Adam. I like his film. He's exciting. He's fun. I hate to throw out comparisons, but he does have a little bit of Johnny Manziel in his game, running left, throwing right, sidearm, curve. I mean, he looks like he's he's changing his slot like a pitcher does. But I do agree with Andrew also. I think the 4 quarterback roster is going to be a rarity now. I don't think you're going to be able to stack 4. If you do, I think it's going to be one year at best. There's just too much going on with the quarterback position. And hey, those guys are expensive. You know what I mean? You can't be paying somebody $250,000 to sit on your bench for the next 2 years. But anyways, we're gonna get it.
And if you're not starting, there's
You're
a good
mad.
chance, there's a good chance that
Yeah,
somebody's
you're
offering you
mad.
to go there and start. So keeping 3 quarterbacks on the roster probably going to be more, as you said, more realistic than having 4.
And you know what? You're having to juggle to keep the 3. You know what I mean? Whoever's third's not happy. So, anyways, we appreciate you guys. You can catch us. We're headed to the round table. It's going to be a live night with all the good news with the 5-star commitment. And we will see you guys in the future. You can check us out at BamaOnLine.com. I'm Tim Watts. That's Andrew Bone, and Charlie Potter and Blake Byler are in Newark. JoJo Hastings is somewhere on our message board right now, I'm sure. And if you need us, you can find us there. And until we see you again, roll tide.